Welcome to the Databricks Skill Builder series. We're glad you're here.
All right, you guys should be able to see my screen at this point. Be able to see an intro to Databricks. So I'm Steven. I'm a solutions architect supporting our retail vertical. And today we're going to talk about DBSQL. We're going to do a brief introduction via a slide deck, and then we'll get started by going through the actual product. It'll be more of a tour of the product since we have such a finite amount of time. Well, I'll make sure that you understand what features Databricks SQL has, and then where to find those features. So if you've been on any of these calls in the past, you've probably seen this curve before, this chart. For those of you that have not, I'll do a brief discussion on what this means. So this is a data maturity curve. Essentially what that is would be what happens to a company once they acquire data. So initially companies say, hey, we've got data, got some clean data, and that's great. But just having data alone and doing nothing with it doesn't offer any value. So you see it's pretty low on your competitive advantage scale here. So companies say, all right, well, I've got clean data. Now I'm going to make some reports. We'll do some ad hoc analysis, some data exploration, start getting some insights into the data. And as you do so, as you can see that you go up this curve, you get more and more competitive advantage, right? But eventually, companies get to a point where it says, okay, like I have my data, I've made reports, I kind of know what's happened in the past. I want to start looking out into the future, right? Start making predictions on what's going to happen. So this is where you bring in the machine learning. And then you say, okay, well, I've done that. If I have an idea of what will happen in the future, now I need to understand how should I respond. And finally, if you know, hey, what's going to happen, you have an idea if that happens, how should you respond? You should just automate the decision-making process. This is your true AI. And as you can see, once you get here, you get a significant amount more competitive advantage than you do from just making some reports off of clean data, right? So what does this mean? Well, a couple of things. We kind of talked about this piece where in the orange, when you're making ad hoc queries, whenever you're doing data exploration, that's all looking in the rearview mirror. That's all, hey, what has happened? And then we get to the machine learning stuff that's looking out through the windshield of, hey, what's going to happen? The problem is, as you can see here from this delineation, that traditionally you need a data warehouse to do all of your BI workloads, right? This is all structured data, very nice curated data. But you need a data lake for your AI. And the reason for that is like you have like unstructured data, like you have like video, audio, text, logs, things like that. You can't fit that into your traditional data warehouse. So you have this two-prong architecture for your data. The problem with that is that it's not just black and white. What happens is you say, hey, I've got some data in my data lake that I want to use for BI. I want to clean it up, curate it, move it over here into my data warehouse. And maybe there's some data in the data warehouse that you're like, hey, this would be good for some machine learning. So you pull it out of your data warehouse and you put it in your data lake, right? So you have this back and forth. So now you're having to maintain copies of the same data in two different technologies. And if you don't maintain them stringently, you can get out of sync and people can be pulling data from here, thinking it's the same data as here, and you get two different results, right? Additionally, data warehouses do really well with security. You can get like row and column level security, really fine-grained security. Data lakes don't offer that traditionally. It's basically like, hey, you have access to this file or you don't, all or nothing, not, hey, you have access to a portion of this file. And then we've already talked about this, a data warehouse, really good at your BI stuff, data lakes, really good at your machine learning stuff, right? So I tell you all that to tell you about the lakehouse. This is what Databricks does. We say, hey, you can probably guess by the name, right? Lakehouse, it's data lake, data warehouse, combine the best of both worlds. So it starts with your cloud data, your data lake, and then allows you to have data warehousing performance on top of your data lake. So no need to pull data out of your data lake like we showed on that previous screen and put it into a data warehouse to do your BI. And then with Unity Catalog, you can bring fine-grained access controls to your data lake. So everything is built on the lake, no need to convolute your architecture. And so we like to say you get world-class performance because, hey, data warehouses are very good at performance. They're also expensive. Data lakes are very inexpensive. So you get the performance of a data warehouse on top of your data lake, right? And then, my favorite one is one source of truth for all of your data. So I used to work in BI, and this was such a pain in the butt, practically. So there'd be times that I'd be working on a project, another team would be working on something very similar, and we'd be using different tools and different copies of data, and we would get different results. And if you're funneling up to the same leadership, that can cause some issues whenever two different people are telling you two different things, right? And then, hey, if you can do everything on your data lake, you can do your warehousing, you can do your engineering, your streaming, data science, no need to make copies of data. I think I've said that once or twice during this presentation. So, when we talk about world-class performance at data lake economics, what do we mean? And I know I'm going pretty quick. I'm trying to get through this. I know that we have a lot to cover. So forgive me if I'm going through this, but it is just an introduction to Databricks SQL. If there is something that you're more interested in, if there's like a specific topic, please let us know and we can maybe have a session that's more focused. This is going to be pretty broad throughout. So when we talk about, hey, you get really good performance and you get really good price, this is exactly what we're talking about. What you're paying for your performance, as you can see, Databricks over here versus your competitors, up to 12 times better with Databricks, right? So a significant improvement. Additionally, with data warehousing, concurrency is very important, and throughput, how many queries an hour can you process? It's not like, hey, everybody show up, all your analysts show up and bring your queries with you, stand in line, and you can run one at a time sequentially, right? You need to have the ability to run a lot of queries and a lot of queries concurrently. So that's what this chart is looking at. So when we first started with Databricks SQL, this is queries per hour. We had some work to do, right? We were not competitive with other cloud data warehouses in July of 2020. But you can see, in 6 months, we actually passed our competitors here. And then, over the last, 18 months or so, actually improved that. And so now we're significantly ahead of your other cloud data warehouses. And I'm going to share the slide deck at the end. So I absolutely encourage you to go to this link. You can read about it. This is not a benchmark that Databricks, made. TPCDS is the industry standard. So feel free to read this article on it, and we will move on to talk about more performance. So, I talked about concurrency. I talked about how much better we've gotten over the years, but we're not resting on our laurels. So just a year-over-year improvement, same workload, 27% improvement, right? And this is only going to continue. We're getting better and better every day. We're running significantly faster and cheaper than other cloud data warehouses. So you say, okay, well, how do you do that? And it's with something called Photon. So Photon is our custom query engine, and it's really kind of comical whenever you look at these Databricks runtimes like 2.x and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then you look at Photon and you see how much of an improvement this is. So it's very, very fast, and something you will only get with Databricks. And it's okay, well, what's that mean for me? Well, it means that your workloads are going to run multiple times faster. If your workloads are running faster, you're using less time with your VMs. And so you cut your compute costs. And then TCO stands for total cost of ownership. That would be what you pay your cloud vendor for the VMs plus what you pay Databricks. What we find is that on average, customers save about 30% using Photon versus not using Photon. All right. So next you say, hey, that's great. You showed us benchmarks. You've told us what we can maybe save with Photon. That's all fine and dandy. That's all theoretical. But what does this mean in the real world? So here's what it means, a couple of customer success stories. Big names here, Johnson & Johnson able to cut their costs for their data workloads in half and get some pretty absurd improvements to data delivery times. Again, another customer seeing over a 60% decrease in their infrastructure cost and still seeing a nice improvement in the delivery times for their data. And these are great. Everybody wants to save money and do it while getting better performance. I'm not knocking that, but this one's my favorite because this to me shows the synergies of a lakehouse, right? If you have 250 engineers working across 70 use cases, if you have different sources of data and you have this convoluted architecture, there's no way you could do any collaboration with 250 engineers and 70 use cases. But with Databricks, with a lakehouse, with one source of truth data, this crew was able to work together, save millions of dollars. These guys were querying tons, and I think it was petabytes of data that Shell was querying. So all of these are important, but because of just the synergies that are unlocked with the lakehouse, this one's my favorite. So I have talked a lot about the Databricks SQL. This is probably your first time actually seeing like a screenshot of what that looks like. This is the Databricks SQL interface. I get asked all the time, hey, it's Databricks, so I have to learn Spark? And the answer is absolutely not. You're going to be writing standard SQL in a SQL editor, very familiar, comfortable interface. And so you have like very familiar over here, you've got tables and then all your columns. You can see the data types for those tables and columns. You can search for them. You write your SQL over here. And something that you might not be used to seeing in a SQL editor is the ability to do visualizations. So you can absolutely, just based on this SQL, make different visualizations. You can then export these to a dashboard within Databricks SQL. So without going to like a Power BI or Tableau, you can do dashboarding within Databricks SQL. But we are not in any way, shape, or form trying to dissuade you from using Power BI or Tableau or something like that. We have native connectors to both of them. Think they're great products. Encourage you to use them. One of the problems whenever you go external and you use like a Tableau or a Power BI is that it can take a while to get data from the warehouse. And this is not Databricks, this is everybody. From a warehouse into Power BI or Tableau, simply because it's single threaded. So I know that whenever I was building Power BI dashboards, that was a pain in the butt. You would get your query ready and you'd hit close and apply, and it would say like retrieving data, 5,000 rows, 10,000 rows, 15,000. If you've got a good sized data set, that can take a while. But that is not a problem anymore with Databricks when using Tableau or Power BI. We have something called Cloud Fetch, which essentially removes that single threaded bottleneck. It allows you to retrieve data in parallel over from Databricks SQL to Tableau to Power BI. And you can see here, this was an example with Tableau and saw a 10x performance improvement. All right. Next, we're going to talk about serverless SQL. So in my opinion, this is the best experience you're going to get. With serverless, you get access to instant compute. Traditionally, the way it works is you would spin up resources from your cloud vendor, or a SQL warehouse or a cluster. And it takes time to have that cluster spun up, right? While it's spinning up, you cannot use it. And while it's spinning up, Databricks doesn't charge you for that, but your cloud vendor does, right? So what we found was one of two people. You'd have analysts that say, okay, I'll spin up some resources, wait, it takes several minutes to get my resources, that's fine, whatever. And so they'll wait for it to spin up, and then they do the queries, and they say, okay, I'm done writing these queries. I'm going to go analyze this data. I'm going to get some business insights so I can make decisions off of it. And their compute shuts down. And then they come back and say, all right, I'm ready to run some additional queries, and they have to spin up a new cluster and wait again, and just have this like back and forth in productivity. So the second one, and one that I would probably be guilty of if I was still doing BI work, is I would just, I would spin up a cluster and say, well, you never have to wait for something to spin up if you never shut it down. And so just have this cluster running all day long, regardless whether or not if I was using it or not. And again, if you're not using it, Databricks is going to charge you for that idle time, but your cloud vendor absolutely will charge you for those VMs, even if they're idle. So you're paying for all this idle time. So with serverless, you don't have to worry about that, because if you shut something down, you can get resources back within seconds. So when you request a serverless warehouse, you have access to run your first query within seconds. So we find that customers save money because they're not paying for that idle time if you have a cluster just spun up and hot and ready to go all day long. All right. Next, let's talk about some upcoming features. I think I got about 3 slides. These are features that are not generally available yet, but something to look forward to coming in the near future. So the first one, query federation. So we've talked a lot about having all of your data in your data lake, one source of truth, and that is ideal, that's best, but we understand it's not always feasible, right? There could be, data that lives within other orgs, within your overarching organization, other departments, and they're using different tools with different data sets, but you'd like to have access to that data. You can use Databricks SQL to actually query data that lives in other databases, and then seamlessly join that data to data that lives in your lakehouse on Delta Lake. So we think this would be great. Really breaks down walls between all of your different, if you have different data warehouses and different tools. So keep an eye on this. It's coming in the future. Next, materialized views. So I don't know what everybody's skill set is on the call. I will assume that, let's just assume that you're not familiar with a materialized view or a view in general. So let's start with a view. A view is not a table that's made and you query. A view is essentially just code that executes whenever you execute like a select star from view A. View A isn't already made. It's computed on the fly whenever you hit select star from view A, right? A materialized view allows you to not have that compute happen on the fly. It allows you to have pre-computed results. So here's what I mean. If you've got a sales table and you've got a store info table, and those tables make up this sales report materialized view, when these tables are updated, this materialized view at that point in time will automatically update, right? Oh, got a little touchy with the mouse there. So I think that these will be really good if you're going to connect to a Power BI or a Tableau. Have something already pre-computed that you can connect to this instead of connecting to here and here, right? So you have to get this as like maybe like a gold layer if you're following the medallion architecture. another reason why you might use a materialized view would be for governance security. So maybe there's some sensitive data in this sales table and you don't want analysts to have access to it. With a view and a materialized view, you can truncate data, you can remove columns, you can remove rows, you can mask data and make it a view instead of giving access to this entire table with the sensitive data on it. All right, the last one, and maybe my favorite, is Python UDFs. So again, I make a lot of parallels back to my last job when I was a BI developer, and be in SQL every day, be in Python a few times a week. And there'd be times that I would be in SQL and I'd like, man, it'd be great if I could just have Python right here, like in line to do some type of analysis or transformation. We didn't have that. So I would end up, creating an ODBC connection out to some notebook, pulling data in, doing my analysis in Python, and having to just create an additional step in my process. With this, you'll be able to create Python functions within SQL and then save those functions to be used later and to be used by more than just you. You can control access to them. You can give your entire team access or only certain people, all analysts, whatever it is, so that that's like redact function. You could come in and just call this function later and not have to write this code out again. And again, it's shareable, which is really nice. And one of the use cases that we see in preview, and one of the intended use cases for this, but not the only, would be machine learning. So within this function, maybe you've got a machine learning model and you want to get predictions on a data set that you have in SQL. You can just call this function and get predictions on your SQL data set. Easy peasy. So I have done quite a bit of talking and not a ton of showing. And so I think the best way to learn is to actually see the product, not just these slides. So that's what we will do now. We will go through a demo. I want to walk you through, what Databricks SQL looks like and where to find certain features. And before that, I'm going to grab a quick drink. All right. So you should be able to still see my screen, but now we are in Databricks. So when you log in Databricks, this is probably the first thing you will see. And just to make sure that I'm not just sharing the slides, share again. All right. So traditionally, this is the first thing you see. It takes you to the data science and engineering persona, where you can create a notebook, you can import data, you can start an auto ML project. You can look at different notebooks that you've viewed in the past, et cetera, et cetera. For Databricks SQL, we're actually going to go up here. We're going to change our persona to SQL, and you'll see that our options in this panel change. You get a new interface here where you can create a query. You can look at sample data sets. You can view some sample dashboards. Like I said, within Databricks SQL, you can make dashboards based off SQL instead of using like a Power BI or Tableau. Or you can go to our Partner Connect, which makes it very easy to connect with like a Power BI or Tableau. So let's start here. Let's start with the query editor. I'm going to close this and show you. This is probably very familiar to most of you if you've worked in any other SQL editors, where you've got a list of your tables here. You click on a table and see all the different columns within that table. You see the data types. You can do something like select from, and then I can just click this over. This query is actually what computed this data set. And I should note, this is all fake. I'm not giving you somebody's actual address or email address, etc. This is all 100% fake. So, I mean, you've seen this before, but what you haven't seen would be, I'm going to go ahead and remove this and make one. The ability to make visualizations in your SQL editor. So I'll just click this plus, and I'll go to visualization, and I'll just, I want a bar graph. And let's say I want to count, this is a CDC table, so it has like records to delete, records to append, etc. I want to get a count of all of that. So let's do this. And now I have a count of all my appends, deletes, and updates. And I can save this. Oh, my internet connection is, there it goes. And now I have this visualization side by side, my actual table of results. And if I update this query, obviously this will update, and so will this. Okay. And then I am going to delete this, and I'm going to show you how you can also make a filter. So maybe I'm like, hey, that's great. I have all these results, but I just want to see my deletes, right? So go to filter. I'm here. I'll just leave it as a single select type. Hit save. And now, without having to re-execute this query, I can just filter to my deletes, and now all I see are deletes, right? So super simple, super easy. You can also take your data. If you do want to export it out, you can save it as a CSV, you can put it to Excel, you can copy your results to a clipboard. If you have this visualization, let's just say it's something that you're interested in having in a dashboard, you can say, add to a dashboard. It'll say, hey, these are some dashboards you've looked at in the past. Maybe you want to add it to one of these. You can create a new dashboard, or you can search for other existing dashboards and select whatever one you're interested in. So super easy. In addition to that, you have this past executions button up here, so you can see things within this query window, previous executions that you have, submitted, and I can see what they were, and I can say, hey, clone this out. I want to go back to this, and now I have that previous query able to edit it. Go tell me with a comment, hey, this query was actually executed last night, and we've copied it over right now for you to continue editing. So I know there's been times that I've been working in a SQL query and made like 3 or 4 changes, and after the 3rd change realized, hey, I think it was better initially, and having to go back was kind of a pain in the butt. But with this, you can easily just go back and get previous iterations of your query. You can schedule your query to be refreshed everything from every minute all the way to every month, and, in between as well. And obviously, you can save your query to use, in the future. Speaking of queries that are saved, jump over to the queries view. And here I'm on all queries, so not just queries that I have made. You can get a listing of all the different queries, who made them, when it was initially created, when was the last time it was executed, is it on a refresh schedule that I just showed you, right? And you can search your queries here. You can also filter down to just queries that you've made yourself. You're listing here. And maybe there are queries that I didn't make, but I really like, and I want to save them in the future. You can put favorites here. I don't have any favorites in this workspace, but if I did, they would show up here. And then finally, you can add tags. So maybe there's a certain project, maybe there's like I think I saw a churn project in here, yeah, that I'm interested in seeing all the queries that are associated with that project. I can just click this, right? And you have tags, and my internet is going a little bit slow, but you have all the tags associated with churn show up here. So super simple to find queries, to save them, to favorite them, to tag them. And a very similar interface for dashboards as well. So previously we were just looking at SQL code. Now this is full-fledged dashboards. Exact same thing here. We have all dashboards, dashboards I've made, dashboards I've favorited, dashboards that have certain tags associated with them. So very easy to find a dashboard. And I think that I will probably, I'll just search it. And I am going to use, take one, let's use this one. This is obviously a very simplistic dashboard, and I may even try to find a better one than that. Let's see what she has here. All right. So here is a little bit more, robust dashboard that I did not make, but you can easily go here and say, hey, this $89,000, I wonder how they computed that. You can go here and you compute a query, and bam, there's the query that was used to come up with that $89,000. So super transparent, super easy to use. I'm just kind of burning through this because I know we don't have a ton of time. All right, alerts. So again, I'll talk about my last job because I feel like it's very relevant to the audience today, since I worked in BI and we're talking about BI today. A lot of the time, the complaints that we would get would be, hey, we have all this great data. We got all these dashboards. The problem is I spend a good portion of my morning trying to figure out where I should focus the rest of my day, right? So it'd be nice if I could just be alerted of where my problems are so I can get a head start on them, jumpstart in the morning of, hey, I need to focus my time. I need to talk to this group or that group instead of having to go through and, view all these different dashboards or do this analysis. Just exception-based reporting is what they call it. So that's what you can do here. You can create alerts. And so I can call one like my last name and test. And then it'll say, okay, what query do you want to use? You got to save your query if you want to use this. And I'll just pick a random one here. And we'll say, hey, if sales, the sum of sales, is less than $1, alert me because something, we may go bankrupt. Something's going on here, right? So you have the option to say, hey, if this threshold is met, is triggered, alert me once until it's fixed. You can say, hey, alert me every time this alert is evaluated and it's still a problem, send me another email. Or you can say, hey, I want to know more than once, but don't hit me every 5 minutes, So hey, don't send me more than 1 hour until it's fixed. So, and you can set this to be seconds, minutes, days, weeks. You can change this. So you have the flexibility here. We won't worry about template. Refresh would be how often is this checked. Right now it's every hour. You need to select some compute for that. Again, I recommend serverless. It's the fastest. And then you click create alert. So I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to create it. But if I did, there'd be a box over here that would pop up and it would say, who do you want to alert? And it would show up with my email address. I could remove that. I could add other people's email addresses or other groups, et cetera, et cetera. All right. Moving on to data. So here's a nice place. We talked about, previously searching to find queries, talked about searching to find dashboards. This is just searching to find like tables and columns, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So I'm going to go, I know a couple of things. I searched for a catalog, but I was interested there. So this is a Unity catalog enabled workspace. When you do that, you have instead of just like database and table, you have catalog, database, and table. So catalogs house databases, databases house tables. This is the way you can think of it. So I am in this Hive Metastore catalog. I searched for databases with Ronin in them because that's my last name, and I usually tag things with my last name in a shared environment like this. So I can see here's this table, excuse me, here's this database. This is the table that I actually queried in the beginning in that SQL editor. So we can click here. And now I can see, you know, all of the columns that are there, their data types. I can add comments. You can see I add this fake comment of customer address collection date was yesterday. Not true, but it just shows the functionality. You can edit comments here very easily. I can take a look at a sample of this data. So this should look familiar, right? The append, delete, all that stuff we saw in the previous SQL editor. I can see some details, hey, what catalogs this in? Is it an external or managed table? Where's it located at? I can look at who has permissions on this table. So I can see that I do have modify. I can read the metadata. I can select from it. I made the thing so I can also grant access to whoever I want. I can add different groups or different email addresses. And I can select what I want them to have access to. I can just select all and give them access to all three. And then I can look at a history of this table. So anytime you make a change to a Delta table, that change is recorded in the metadata. So we can see the table was initially created version 0. It was part of a Delta Lab tables pipeline. Don't worry about Delta Lab tables right now. We have individual sessions on that. Just know it's a tool to make ETL very easy. We can see from there that we appended data. And then we can see that I made a comment. I added a comment, just the comment said just customer address. Okay. And then I changed it to be what you just saw on the previous screen of customer address collection date 1/17/23. So you can see, for auditing purposes, what happens to your table. All right. And then if you have Unity Catalog, you can do searches for anything Unity Catalog enabled here. So you could search for like churn, and then you could find, tables, queries, dashboards, etc. All kind of like a one-stop shop in this kind of search up here in the upper left. All right. Next, let's look at SQL warehouses. So this is where you create your compute. These are all the warehouses that we have already created in this workspace. I can create another one. I can name it, surprise, surprise, I'm not very creative, Ronin test. And then I can pick a cluster size. They're all t-shirt size. We recommend that you start with a medium and then calibrate from there. You can have it turn off after so many minutes of inactivity, right, to save you that idle time. You can have it scale up if you need more. You can say, hey, I have a minimum of 1. You can set this higher or lower. And then you select your type, right? So you have serverless, which I've already talked about. You have Pro and Classic. Pro, you're going to get a lot of those features that we spoke about, like the query federation, the Python UDFs, the materialized views. That's all going to be with Pro. You're not going to get a lot of those premium features if you're just with Classic. So we feel like serverless is your best option. Pro is your next best option. And then you can come down here to advanced. You can add tags to this cluster, to this warehouse. So you could say like owner is marketing or something like that, which would help with tracking expenses for different groups within your org. Last thing I want to talk about in this area would be channel. So you'll see there's two options, current and preview. If you're on current, you will only get features that are generally available. So no preview features will be available to you. If you choose preview, you get access to the latest and greatest, maybe things that aren't 100% baked yet, but pretty close. You can have access to them. But current is the default because it's only going to have access to things that are generally available. All right, then we can actually look at a query history. You can see it's got me up here, last 14 days, what all have I done? And we find one. If I click one, obviously you can see the query here. You can then see, hey, how long did it take? 136 milliseconds, and you can get an idea for, where that time was spent. Essentially, all of this was spent optimizing, right? Doing data skipping, et cetera. You can open the query profile. Oh, and I ran this off cache, so it's not going to be there, of course. But traditionally, you would see like a tree here, and you can see the different stages that the query went through. And that's going to help you if you're trying to optimize your queries. All right, let's talk about Partner Connect. So if you were wanting to connect to like a Power BI Tableau, you can do it very easily. You can come here to Partner Connect. This is not an exhaustive list of all the vendors we work with. These, if you're in Partner Connect, we've just made it very easy for you to connect to them. Meaning, if I want to create a Power BI dashboard, I click here, I pick whatever compute I want to use, and maybe I'll pick this, and then I download a connection file. Open this. You can see your instructions here, and essentially, when you open this file, you'll be ready to go. You'll have a connection to Power BI from Databricks SQL. So super simple, and feel free to browse through here, different partners, right? You can search up here. You can filter it to only like, I just care about BI, visualization. Here's the different partners that we have within Partner Connect. All right, I think we've pretty much hit the end. I don't know there's much else that I want to cover today. We've talked about, you can share. So you can share queries very easily as well. So the heads up, super simple there. I think I've already mentioned this, but you can, from here, just click this plus sign and say, give me a new query, or I can say, hey, open an existing one, right? And then search, whenever this loads up, search all of my queries and just open them up and get back to work. And again, you have your views here of my query, favorites, anything that's in trash, etc. Filter by tags. So you can easily do that within the query editor instead of having to go out and do it over here. Let me see if there's anything else I want to cover on dashboarding. I think this is the one we looked at earlier. Yeah, you can schedule dashboards, right? You can subscribe to it. You can refresh it here. You can edit them when you edit. Now, this isn't my dashboard, but I have access to it. I will not make too many changes, but obviously you can click the X's to delete things. You can resize, et cetera, et cetera. I can say done editing. You can change the colors. You can add a visualization or text box to filter here. So super simple. And again, this is all based off of SQL. So no learning like a DAX or an encode or something like that. It's all just SQL codes, which we just saw here. So all very easy. That's probably enough for today. I imagine, we've covered a lot of stuff, walked through at a high level what Databricks SQL is and where to find features, et cetera, et cetera. I actually can't see the Q&A window, and I don't know if we have anybody driving Q&A today for us. So sorry if you have a question, I can't see it. Feel free to reach out to us. If you're an existing Databricks customer, reach out to your account team and feel free to ask about any Databricks SQL questions you have. Hope that this provided value for you today and hope to see you again soon. So see you later.